All right, we have a panel right now. We're going to talk about employee retention, hiring employees. We have Danny Cox from Crossroads, if you want to come up. Chad Higbee from Hope Healthcare, Katie Unland from Cedar Valley, and then Tracy Larson from where's Tracy? Tracy here? Right here. Tracy, there you are. Tracy from Three Rivers. So I'm going to ask some questions. And feel free. I'm just going to get it started for everybody, okay? So basically, I'm going to get it started, ask the first question. If you all want to interject or ask questions, I'll come bring the microphone to you. This is your time to ask questions, find out what everybody else is doing during the time of crisis of hiring and retaining employees. So thank you. We have the microphone, right? We're good? All right, so the first question I'm going to ask you is, what methods of recruiting are you doing for your agency right now, like ZipRecruiter or any of those, if anybody wants to answer that?
Okay, well, since I have the mic, I can start and pass it around. I wouldn't say that we have found one single thing that has been super effective in terms of the route that we use. So we typically use LinkedIn, we use Facebook, a lot of social media, our website. Indeed has probably been the one that's been the most successful for us in terms of getting the word out. But I guess I would say what's been more important to us is not necessarily the avenue we're using, but just creating the culture and having the reputation in our community. We live in Iowa, we're a relatively small community, and so word gets around if you're a good employer, and so that tends to help. Word of mouth, I guess, is probably our very best. Employee referrals, word of mouth, that tends to be where our bread and butter is with getting new staff.
We do it all. We have 11 sites over 7 states. So in one state we have 4 sites, but all 4 of those sites are in different geographical areas. So what works at one doesn't work for another. So we also do a lot of social media. Indeed, we actually have a company who sources for us, especially for the management positions, the executive director, clinical director, and those kind of things. So we find it takes everything. And the big thing for us is we kind of recreated how we look at those applications at the site level with a lot of energy and moving on them quickly and not letting them set for even 24 hours, because what we found, if we do that, someone else has already picked them up.
So you move pretty quickly to hire somebody. Okay.
We use Indeed a lot and word of mouth through our patients as well as our employees a lot. So, but it's the same thing. We're getting lots of applications come through. We make the phone calls. 50% of them call you back. 50% of them show up once they do call you back. So it's a very hard process right now.
All the above. You know, really, in a sense, I mean, there's not too many options for all of us as operators, but what we found really great success in is bonuses. I would rather give, if I'm going to have to spend money, to my own folks for referring, good word of mouth referral. And we've done different varying amounts over time, over the years, you know, for different RNs, even down to CNAs. And so found to be off and on somewhat successful. You know, sometimes the folks will respond, sometimes they won't. But I know one of the CNAs shared something just recently. It's always fun to go to your folks and be able to say thanks, you know, for referring somebody. Yeah, I'm in and out, right? You can hear me in and out. And so we end up hiring. And there's a process to that, because that's in a form to make sure there's not any infighting. And I referred that person. No, you don't. You know, that kind of thing. And we actually had the RN referral bonus up to $5,000.
Wow.
And so it was a CNA that we got to award that to.
Did they have to stay on?
They have to stay on a certain period of time. Yeah, there's a lot of rules. It's not a check. There you go. Oh,
yeah.
CNA.
Yeah.
On. But, you know, if the employee quits, they, you know, basically worked it out month to month so we can budget that. It's not just $5,000, it's out the window and everybody's gone in a month, you know. So she basically gets a little extra boost on her paycheck every month over 12 months, and then that's paid out over 12 months.
That's great. All right, so since COVID, employees have become more accustomed to working from home and having flexibility around their working day. What have you done differently in hiring and retaining employees now that I mean, we're all kind of accustomed to having the opportunity to do a load of laundry, as Hall likes to say, while we're working during the day, or you know, working from home when people want that flexibility.
We don't have a lot of positions that work from home, really. I mean, we're out in the field pretty much all the time. Even our billing is in the office every single day, so we don't do that. As far as keeping the employees once we have them, I think it's a family thing in our business. You kind of have Donna Bean, who's our mom to everybody in the offices, and you have Dana, who is an administrator, and she coddles her employees, and she's definitely very much there for them. And then you have me, who's kind of blunt, but I'm clinical. And yes, I'm kind of blunt, but I'm the one that's going to stick up for the staff. And they learn that, and they learn to trust us. And I think we have a lot of employees that think that they have green or grass on the other side, and they'll leave. But almost all of them come back. And so I think that's a testament to what Three Rivers does.
Yeah, I would say that we don't have a ton of positions currently that work remotely, but we have been recently challenging ourselves with the fact that the workforce now wants to do that. And if we aren't able to be flexible and figure out how we can get that done, we may not be relevant in that space. And so we've been trying to work with our staff. We've done some surveying lately, actually, where we did a work arrangement survey and want to find out what do people want, what do they wish they had. And then different departments, it's kind of you have to kind of look at that department by department and just figure out how to be creative. Because if you aren't willing to look at that and be creative, other people will, and you'll lose out on some of those applications, at least in our area. So we're really challenging ourselves to survey them, kind of find out what they need, and do the best we can to provide what they're asking for within reason.
I would say the same. We really haven't had any positions go remotely. During COVID, maybe a few. But we've kind of taken the stance of it's kind of hard to let a biller work from home when the nurse can't work from home. With that said, we are kind of starting to look at different avenues, because I think last night, Mark, we were talking, I think he asked me, we're talking about his presentation today, and he's like, you know, what do you think the number one thing that people want are? And I said, well, it's not money, because that's what I thought. And we gave money. And then we realized that we had a lot of people that were kind of offended by that had been with us for a long time. And what we realized is people really want to be respected and want to be acknowledged for their longevity and staying. So again, we're kind of looking at all kinds of different avenues, but sorry. Right now we're not doing anything remotely because we just haven't figured out how to do it.
I think what COVID taught us a lot of stuff, you know, the things that we didn't do prior, and you talk to a guy that's been doing this for 28 years, so the huggy, touchy, warm, fuzzy kind of hospice that we've known, you know, it forced us to be a lot more flexible just to keep our businesses running. And so I think we've really tried to look at how many meetings we have and to really make those meetings while not losing that familial touch and that community, that sense of community that we have as a team. We've really tried to look at how many times we meet and to make that those times be of value to the staff and not just a download or a verbal barf of everything that we want to share or got to get out, you know, and we try to do that and use the technology to do that. But the times that we meet, we really try to condense that and be mindful of that, because unlike the rest of us that just want to work, you know, a lot of the folks we have on the team want to do their work and get home to the kids and things like that. So we've just tried to find a better balance as it relates to just meetings, you know, for the sake of meetings. So.
Right. All right, so I know this thing's not going to work. I'm just going to yell. I have a very loud voice, PE voice. Can we hear it? No? I don't think it works. You had a question?
I'll yell.
Okay.
This is regarding employee retention. So we heard a lot of really good ideas this morning that I'll implement, but specifically to retention for those employees who have, you know, post 5 years, things like that. What are you guys doing, or creative things to do within your walls? What creative things are you doing now?
So I actually, when Mark was giving his presentation, I 100% agreed with your list of what employees want, because your number one thing, if I recall, was feeling a sense of belonging, or number 2, it was up there in the top couple, sense of belonging. And I think that as we've done our work, sense of belonging has been all we hear about. So we do a lot of things. So we do a survey that kind of gauges employee engagement. It's called the Q12 from Gallup. That gives us information, and then we take that a step further and meet with teams and find out what can we be doing better to improve, your work situation. And we met with about 15 different teams or different groups, and all of them come back with the same thing. We want to feel like we work hard, we get burned out, we have difficult jobs. We want to have time to connect. We want to have time to feel like we belong and have time for each other. And so we've taken a couple different strategies from that information. One thing that we've done is we've reallocated some budget dollars, which may seem simple, but we've given managers all a budget allotment, and half of it is supposed to be spent on group gatherings. And so every quarter they take their team and they do something fun, and it can be during work hours. They can go for a hike, they can go get ice cream, they can go get lunch, something purposeful to get them out. So they have kind of one time a quarter for their group of their team to take them out to do a group thing. And then we have individual recognition, because we've also found that being recognized and appreciated is also really important, and it's honestly an area that we struggle with because everybody takes that differently. Like if I show you recognition, you may not view it as recognition if I'm not doing it in the right way for you. And so just trying to learn more about your people and provide what they need, and that's very individualized is what we've found. So that's just one example of an approach that we've used to try to further that connection, give them time, and give them permission to do it during the workday, because often they say, well, I have kids, I can't do this after work. So allow them to have team coverage and work for each other to get that time away during the day.
For us, it's kind of like what you said too. Some of the things we've looked at is, we look through the COVID, we lost some significant leadership at some of our sites. Some through retirement, some different forms of attrition. And what we realized is what we were saying at a little bit higher level to the clinical directors and executive directors was never really getting down a lot of times to the nurses and the aides and the people that are doing the frontline work. So what we figured out really quickly is we have to get back out there. The people have to see us. They have to know what makes us tick, why we're in hospice, why we continue to do this every day, just the why. And you get so much buy-in from the staff when they realize that you're in here because of some event. You have a calling. Hospice for me is a calling. I mean, I can talk about hospice all day and all night, and do sometimes to my family's dismay. But I believe everybody deserves it. So I think for us, it's trying to get back to that level. And also through COVID, we realized with IDGs or IDTs that some of those were being done remotely, and we lost those connections between the marketer and the nurse aide. And we heard marketers saying, well, I don't know who my team is. And we're like, well, are you going to IDG? Well, I didn't know that was an option. So we really, for us, it was going back to basics and, kind of re-educating on why we do what we do and how we do it, because we lost so much of that.
Lisa, one in particular thing that we've done, just as a concrete example, is, I was talking about meetings and trying to minimize that and make those as hearty or as meaty as possible. But, we had, when we got back down to being purposeful about meeting with the different disciplines, we were sitting in, and we do this off-site remotely, and we treat them to lunch like the aides. We took them all out, and we just said, hey, how can we, very similar to what Katie mentioned, maybe not as formalized as the survey, but we said, hey, what can we do? What are we doing that we shouldn't be doing, and what can we do more of that's more beneficial or brings value to your life? And one of the things that came out of that we put into action actually and expand. Steve and I are, Fisher and Steve, we're always talking about, as owners, we're talking about how can we expand our benefits, be reasonable, not kill the business, but yet compete with all the much larger corporate entities that we have to compete against. And one of the things that came out of an AID meeting actually was mental health days. We were very lacking in our bereavement policy, so we expanded that over time and expanded those days. Primarily started as a home health company that was, at least the policies and procedures were born out of that. That had like a half a day recognition for a loss. We're in death and bereavement, so we expanded that by another 3 days, And then one of the things that we just recently enacted on the 1st of April was this idea that came out of the AID meeting, and saying, hey, look, I may be really close to a family member that we've had on for 6-8 months, and then all of a sudden the patient dies. I really got close to that patient, and I'm struggling. I just can't get past this next patient. I got to go home. I need some downtime. And so we just realized that there was some value in that, because as we begin to talk amongst ourselves, it's not something that hits the company's bottom line unless it's used, right? So people may use it, and that's okay, because that's an added extra benefit. And if they need it, you want to keep your folks as fresh as possible. But even more importantly, it was saying, hey, we hear an idea that you as an aide have, and we put it into action. And I think it's a testament. We're a 7-year-old company. One aide's been with us 6 years. Of the 8 that we have now, one aide's been with us 6 years, and the other 2 have been 5 years. And so for that position, for us, that's a big deal. So when those folks talk, it's in our best interest to, if it's reasonable, to put that in action. That's one concrete example that we've done.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry. Well, you said mental health days. Is that only when there's a death, or do you allow mental health days for somebody who's just completely stressed out or needs like a day off, or is that above and beyond PTO?
That's above and beyond PTO. Yeah, it's just a different category altogether. We want to make sure that's straight across the. And we put some specific parameters. You can't use it on the front side or back side of PTO.
Right.
We just want to extend it a couple days,
right.
or start it early a couple days. It's going to be used for time. I mean, what it's intended.
I need a break. I'm about to have a mental breakdown. Right? I'm joking when I say that, but we all dealing with a lot of stress right now. Anybody who's been working through the pandemic, especially us in healthcare, it's been very stressful. Can we all agree? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think mental health is definitely something that's very serious.
We do individual definition as well as each office. We have 10 offices across the whole state of Missouri. And every office has their own RNC, which I feel like that helps the fact that they can be very specific to their teams, and they're acknowledging their teams individually, which is huge for us. We're big on small caseloads because we're all moms and we're all dads and we're all family, we have families, and so that was really important for us to keep our employees, is to keep the caseloads down. In the city, we get interviews from some nurses who are seeing 20 to 30 patients, and that's just not where we're at. Average 10 to 12 per nurse, so we keep it fairly low for that nurses and aides to help.
So I just want to say one thing that we just moved our office, and so we're fortunate to move a lot of extra space. We're going to grow into, hopefully. But with that, we set up a quiet room. And so I took one of the offices and got a couch in there, some recliners, a waterfall, decorated it in a way that was soothing with little Japanese rock garden and plants and stuff like that. And the purpose of that room is really just to go decompress. I mean, if you had a bad night on call, you want to go take a nap, go to the quiet room, it's okay, not a big deal. We have lines on it, little things, so it's quiet room. Families come in there, we can do, you can talk to families in there, we can read and things. The main thing for the quiet room is just to give a safe space for people to decompress. And so, we're hoping that kind of catches on, and just a way to tell people thank you, that we appreciate them and their help.
Yeah, and you just moved, what, about 6 weeks ago, a month ago? Yeah. And has it been used?
It has. We actually had our first family member come in, so I got to use it for that. But we also did Massage Appreciation Day, so we used the quiet room for massages. So we had massage therapists come in during IDP for 2 weeks in a row. That way people could come out and get their massage. But honestly, I think people are still trying to figure out what it is. Maybe I should have named it the quiet room. I'm like, y'all can go in there, you can use it. You can actually talk to each other in there. I mean, it's not a place where you have to be completely quiet, but it was.
The room of requirement.
What's that?
I didn't get my invitation, but
You had a question?
Yeah, come on.
Do you want this?
So one of the things that I feel like I've been talking with a lot is, and maybe everybody doesn't have that one employee that doesn't want to participate in the group. And I feel like we have an employee recognition program, which typically the people go above and beyond and give that extra. But then I feel so guilty, like, well, I need to recognize everybody, and then I feel like would almost tick them off. I'm working so hard and got recognized, but you know what I mean, like nobody left behind. How do you how do you make sure you include everybody when you have a really shitty attitude? And it's not even just a shitty attitude, it's just her personality. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. And I love her to death. She's been with us for 14 years. She's fantastic at her job, but she's not a come together and let's be a group. She doesn't, you know what I mean? Right. I mean, if you're gonna get a fight, I want her to decide on your own, but you know what I mean? I just don't know how you include them when they're not wanting to be included and then not feel guilty that they're being left out.
I think you've got to meet people where they're at. It's kind of the Mark's presentation earlier today. You know, it's not only a generational thing; it's a regional thing. It's a personal thing. Some people, I'm a fan, but you know, I've got a best friend that if you come to him hug, he's gonna be like hands up like you're holding him up or something. So I think it's just meeting people where they're at and realizing that somebody said you can't save everybody, and that everyone is different. You just kind of have to figure out what makes that person tick. And if you can't figure it out, that's okay, at least you try. But you're never going to please everybody the same way. And sometimes people are happy who don't even know they're happy.
Do you want to try this? It might work.
So as leaders, how do we take care of our other leaders that are alongside us, right? They're walking through the fire with us, the storm, when you do have shortages. How do we, because as leaders, we all have to make sure we take care of ourselves, we know that, but how can you share some examples of what do you do for your director of nurses, your ADONs, you know, what do you do for them to show appreciation and that you're taking care of them when they're shorthanded?
That's a tough question because
I think all of them are individuals, so everybody you handle so separately.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I think one thing that we've done, I guess, that I think has been helpful is we've kind of created that mentality that, you know, your management team is kind of like your number one, meaning like we're going to support one another no matter what. Like we're going to have time dedicated to come together and vent or talk about our challenges and then allow for best practices to be shared amongst one another. Because a lot of times you have a manager who's having a problem or they're having a stress that maybe this other manager had been through and they did these XYZ things that helped them or they did these things that made it worse. And so I guess I kind of think that some of that comes from having the connections and the relationships on your team to fall back on each other and get ideas, because a lot of times people just come in and say, hey, like you said, hey, this person doesn't want to participate. Do you have any thoughts? And some people have good ideas that I think it's good to try to learn from each other and just support each other through. Otherwise, I mean, same recognition individually, like you said, you got to have that individually for your managers too.
I think in our office, Donna started the company 17 years. Yeah. And Dana and I came on really quickly right after that in the year, and so we're seen more as maybe upper management. So for me, I have to really, I'm a busy girl. I'm constantly working, and I got to stop and think, you know what, when I walk into an office, if I'll just take 5 minutes and take that RNC and give her just one-on-one time to talk to me, that alone helps her and or him and just makes them feel like they're supported at that moment. So I have to really dig down and say, take 5 minutes, Tracy, and give them that time. Because
That's
it
what I
really
was
helps.
gonna
Or call them.
It is to take, just to say hi, how are you doing? Because sometimes people take for granted and they never even ask that. That goes a long way. You know, I tell my people always, I said, you don't need to know everything about everybody, but know something about everyone. You know, maybe you know that you're having trouble with your kid and you're having trouble with whatever, and remembering that. It's those one-on-one connections. But just to say, how are you doing? And not, because I'm kind of bad like your mom. I go to the site sometimes and I'm halfway down the hall and I have to go, I just saw 2 people turn around because I said, hey, I didn't mean to ignore you. I just thought, you know, I go 100 miles a minute. My brain is and my legs do too. So I'm here to there before I think about, oh, I should have said hi.
I think also, I mean, we all have so much going on in our lives. We have a phone. I mean, these things keep us constantly entertained. People are like this all the time. And not only you could be looking at your phone, but your mind is here and your mind is there. What we do today is far more than what was done 20 years ago. I mean, I was in a meeting 10 years ago, and this was 10 years ago, on an average day back in the 1990, you would touch 10 people a day. In 2015, it was 200 on average. So think about that. All the people we're emailing, all the people we're dealing with, all the people that we are associating ourselves with and working with, customers, employees or whatever, that's a lot of people, and that's a lot more stress put on us on top of all the technology, and everything's instant, right? I get off an airplane, my phone's buzzing, right, Mark? I mean, you get it, and you're constantly looking at your phone, what's going on, what's next? There's really not a lot of downtime that we get, right, as people, and that's probably something that we all probably need to focus on.
I travel a lot now, and I love the constant lock on the plane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it means I get a 30-minute hour
Yeah,
long break
yeah,
you pay
yeah,
for when you land.
yeah. Can everybody hear okay?
A prime example, once Brian just came on and joined the organization not too long ago, and he said something that caught me one time, and how I made that analogous to your question is, you know, he came out of the medical device and pharma world, and what he used to do as a sales leader is that those who were really producing, he would take budgeting dollars from those folks, or from the ones that weren't producing as much, maybe the ones that were. And I thought, man, that ain't cool. I mean, I bet you have angry people. But his point was, you invest your dollars and, you know, try to be fair, but you invest your dollars where you're going to get the most ROI. So how I made that analogous to my leadership practice, or my continuation of always learning about, you know, how to become a better leader is my time. And so I knew that when we were smaller, I could do a lot of that one-on-one stuff, and it was a close-knit group. But I knew, just because I've been there, done that, as we grew, that was going to become less and less. And I was really going to have to, you know, not be able to spend as much time with this person or that person, but really concentrate so we can get things done in a advance forward. And like your size, I mean, it's all you can do for your leadership groups to be able to do that. And I'm not as consistent as I would love to be. You know, one-on-one time with Steve, a monthly call, whatever that may be. You know, we'll set up things, we get busy, and we blew by that time or something. But I'm going to be very purposeful about if you're going to advance the cause of what you're doing to get the gift at hospice more, it's hard, but you have to be disciplined to try to invest in those that are around you so they can replicate themselves as well. Because that's really what you're doing. Because you're replicating yourself.
It's been a challenge as you grow. Time is valuable because I have to, as leaders, we all have our objective of the day, the fires we have to put out, talking to the employee that is having a crisis, and then those that are anchoring it down for us. I feel like sometimes we just walk right by them and not acknowledge, you know, and Mondays for me, I don't try not to do a lot, where I've got staff in the office and I will go purposefully say hello and talk and, you know, how are things going. But as we've grown, it's harder because my phone starts going off at 6:37 in the morning, and I've taken 7 phone calls by the time I even hit the office, and I already have my agenda of the day. It's difficult.
One of my biggest breakthroughs, I think, in having that time was with my director of HR. And sitting down and just learning little things about when you say your story. We've been working for a year and a half, and it's really been trying to purposeful and do some things different. We want to have confidence and take that back on check and install that, see how that works. And we just set aside a specific time, and she started sharing this whole story about how close she was to basically raised by her grandparents. And so then I caught myself, you know, polar Marcus almost, you know, I started to become emotional because I could relate because I was so tight with my mom's dad, my grandfather. And we both found ourselves crying together, you know. But I'm telling you, that moment, the relationship changed. From then on, you know, and I saw her differently. Hopefully she saw me a little bit differently because I took the time to go, tell me about you know. And I think that's where you have to start. And it's not always a bed of roses from just because you talk about each other's past and that'll cry together. But it does help. At least I think it shows that you truly care about it.
You had a question?
I had a question, but I wanted to comment on something that you had said. One of the things that has worked for me and kind of transformed the way that I lead is being intentional, setting that time aside, like you were saying. But in that time, in that space, something I do that's unique as well, I think is unique, is I open it up for a full performance review for me as the leader. and I sit in their chair and they sit in my chair, and I say, how am I doing? How am I leading you? I do your annual performance review, do mine. Have I supported you in the way that you need to be supported? What are some things that I'm not doing right? What are some areas that I'm not getting right? I'm like, be honest. Be brutally honest. This is a safe space and time. I'm not going to hold it against you. You can tell me. And a lot of times I'll find little quirks in the relationship that I didn't know were there. Or it's like, well, in the last meeting we had, I felt like you called me out. And it's like, oh, I wasn't even talking about you. I was talking about somebody else completely. And then it's like, oh, you didn't mean that for me? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, this whole time I've been carrying this. I said, well, why didn't you ever come and approach me and talk about it? Well, I just pushed it down. And then you have all this static in the relationship that didn't necessarily need to be there. But that was my comment. So my question is, and we talked about this at lunch, Monica said, what do you do, so this is for you guys, or any expert in the room, what do you do when you got an employee that's a rock star, that's been promoted to the highest level they're ever going to be promoted to, or they're making that cap compensation, and you have no more room to go? What do you do?
Got it? Oh, yeah, take the mic, take the mic.
You go to their family. I'll tell you a story. This I did for me. I have an administrator. She was a new administrator. She's a single mother of a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 7-year-old little girl that is so cute and so ornery. You wouldn't believe it. She has the best kids. And she was deathly ill with COVID. And she was a brand new administrator, really worried about what am I going to do. And I'd known her for quite a while. And so her kids, her 16-year-old and her 15-year-old, took such good care of her. And the 16-year-old's a boy, and he made sure the little 7-year-old sister was dressed and in school and everything. So after Denny recovered from COVID, and I talked to her and her kids, and they're just the best kids. Well, I gave her a bonus. And I said, but it's not for you. You have to give it to so many. I get 200 to this boy and 200 to the 15-year-old. And if she only give the 7-year-old 100, because she was a little bit of a pain. And anyway, you wouldn't believe how good that made me feel. I don't know if I did it for her or for me, but it made me feel good to recognize her children. Well, that's all she cared about. I mean, that meant more to her than if I gave her. So you could always go and reduce, just like Tiffany. Tiffany had been with me a lot of years, and she was burnt out. She was a RN coordinator, director of nursing, burnt out. What? And she was going to resign. Well, we're not about to let her resign. Would you let her resign? Come on, you know. So we created a position for her. You can do that. She is the regional RN coordinator. She's the resource. She's Tracy's sidekick. She helps Tracy, but she is also the resource for all the statewide RN coordinators. If they have a problem or a question, they have a person they can go to that they can relate to. So you can, get personal, get your feet on the ground with your staff and find out where their weaknesses are and their strengths are. You could do that. I got a lot of staff, and I know nearly all of them. But create positions for them. Don't let them go. Always, it's so much better to manage than it is to replace. So much better.
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
If you were looking for cap or whatever, I have a person that comes to mind that's a medical record clerk at one of our sites, and she is a rock star. I mean, she knows medical records backwards, forwards. She's been with us for 18 years. Has really should have been capped a long time ago, but that she's making more money than anyone else in the company. And she's like, I'd like a raise. And when we went through, like, you're great at your job. You have to be truthful. People tell them they're capped and all that kind of stuff. But we asked her, would you be interested in helping train? Would you be interested in some travel? And she's like, I would love that. So we're using that person, giving her opportunities that we can give her based on her education and her salary where she's at now. So she feels back to what kind of comes back to Mark's thing again. For her, it was feeling part of something bigger than her. It really wasn't about the money. It was one of the recognition for what she was doing. So we found that we could do that.
So, I'm sorry. Explain, because we were talking about this lunch, when an employee you are interviewing and they're coming in wanting management, right? And it's happened in our office where my clinical manager's like, I need them. I'm like, yeah, but we're not gonna pay this, because where do you go from there? You know, we have to be strategic if we're gonna survive the haircuts and survive inflation, because we do want to do good by our employees. How do you have that conversation with your other managers? Like, look, and it's tough because we're not going to pay, and I'm not going to pay manager to pay for a farm case manager or a social worker who's wanting not to be great.
Well, you really can't. I mean, hospice is I always say hospice is a calling. I truly believe that. And we're never going to be able to compete with a big hospital or a big healthcare system. I find just being honest with people in the beginning of the interview process, trying to figure out who they are, what makes them kind of tick, the position they're going to. Because we see that every day. They come in wanting $100,000 as a case manager in something like Philadelphia, something like Atlanta. It's like we can't do that. So we have to unfortunately explain to the managers that we can't make that sacrifice. And we're just going to have to keep looking. And again, I think as long as you're open and honest with your managers, that goes a long way. If you just say no, you've lost them. So I think it's just having an open conversation for me.
I think if you're not compensating in other ways, that's kind of what we are. We're not the top of the line on salaries and stuff, but we compensate in so many other ways.
Right.
Yes, and to most people, especially nowadays, those extras are more important than the actual money anyway. And so if you can give them that extra time or that extra, it means more to them than paying them whatever.
You had something to say? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just on the retention piece with Three Rivers, what I found in my offices when we need to hire is looking to see who I already have in those offices that can possibly be moved up in that position. And I think that really has brought all those other employees are like, oh, I don't have to be a CNA for the rest of my life. I just had a CNA in one of my offices. She's been with our company almost 7 years, and she just came to me and she said, I don't want to be a CNA forever. And she gave me her 2-week notice. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about anything except she wanted more for herself. We had a volunteer coordinator position open, and I said, would you like to possibly interview for that? I had 12 other people interviewing, but immediately she knew more about our company, of course, because she's already invested her life and her time there. She interviewed excellent. It wasn't like we just gave it to her. She went through the complete process, which was a really good learning experience for her. But all my other offices immediately, they were like, oh, so we don't have to stay a CNA. If we really want to grow with this company, dedicate ourselves, and live and breathe, the culture that we have, and they're meeting the expectations, they know that they can move up as well. And I think that's what we do really well, is we don't put a cap on, this is your title and you cannot ever move forward. It happened with myself. Miss Donna was, gracious enough to allow me to move forward as well. And I think that's part of it. These people have invested time with us. We owe it to them to give them the opportunity for this to become their career. This CNA, she wants to have a career with a company. And I think that's important. We sometimes look at these folks and say, yeah, we can find another CNA. Well, that's not easy. We know. And the biggest piece of this was she's determined now to help me find somebody that's going to replace her, because she was one of the very best CNAs we probably have in the company. So she is determined to help find a replacement that's going to be able to fill her shoes.
Thank you. I mean, I think I think that, do we have time for one more question or anything? I think we're right about at our break. Does anybody have a question or something they want to say?
I have a question. This goes back to Danny, your first statement. When you were talking about your recruitment, you said that you actually use somebody to help you source. Are you using somebody that helps you source just hospice, or do they specialize in hospice, or are they in other business lines too?
They're mostly healthcare, but definitely.
The question was, I don't think it was reading very well. If there is a recruiter or somebody you're using to specially find employees just for hospice?
Yes.
Okay.
We are. We have a company that, especially for the senior management, for a long time, they kind of really talked to them. We saw Essence Minds, they kind of learned about that for within their organization and did well with us. And for years, we were using it for all positions. We quickly learned that we could no longer do that for case managers and nursing because, like I said earlier, if you wait 24 hours, they're gone. But we still use them for senior management, and they will still filter and forward us applications if they source for all those other positions.
And the name again is?
Of the company?
Yeah.
Pathways.
No, of the recruiter.
It's Pathways.
Pathways, got it, okay. All right, everybody, thank you to everybody up here, awesome.